Chloe Carter grew up in a family where attention always seemed to be divided very clearly. At the center of almost every conversation was her older brother, Ryan. From a young age, Ryan had been the pride of their parents. He was energetic, outgoing, and always knew how to draw people's attention. Whenever he achieved something, the whole family celebrated as if it were a major victory. His photos hung on the living room wall, and stories about him were repeated again and again at family dinners. Chloe, however, was different. She was quieter, someone who preferred reading and studying. At school, she was always among the top students. She often brought home certificates and medals from science competitions. But when she showed them to her parents, their reaction was usually just a small nod and the familiar words, "Good job." It wasn't complete indifference, but it wasn't the same pride they showed Ryan either. Over time, Chloe began to understand that in her family, she always came second. It wasn't because she had done anything wrong, but simply because Ryan was seen as the one with the brighter future. Her mother often told others that Chloe was the easiest child to raise. On the surface, it sounded like a compliment, but Chloe knew what it really meant. It meant her parents didn't feel the need to give her much attention. They believed Chloe would always be able to take care of herself. Because of that, most of the family's attention, expectations, and pride were focused on Ryan. When he played in a school football game, the whole family showed up in the stands to cheer for him. When he received an award, their parents took photos and proudly showed them to every relative. Meanwhile, Chloe's moments usually passed by in silence. Over time, Chloe grew used to standing in the background. She stopped expecting praise or attention. Instead, she learned to focus on her own path. And that quiet space taught her something important. Sometimes the people who receive the least attention are the ones quietly building something meaningful for their future. After graduating from college, Chloe Carter began working in the emergency department of a large hospital in the city. She chose the night shift, from 7 in the evening until 7 in the morning. For many people, working at night might feel exhausting and lonely, but for Chloe, it was where she truly felt useful. The emergency room at night was almost never quiet. There were times when everything happened so quickly that no one even had a few minutes to sit down and rest. Ambulances kept arriving with patients, people injured in traffic accidents, stroke victims, overdose cases, or critically ill patients who needed immediate treatment. In that environment, Chloe had to learn how to think quickly, act precisely, and stay calm even when the pressure around her never seemed to stop. On many nights, she rushed from one room to another, checking heart monitors, administering medication, and assisting doctors in urgent emergency cases. Sometimes, just a few seconds could determine whether someone lived or died. Chloe understood that every decision she made carried enormous weight. That job required not only medical knowledge but also strong physical and mental endurance. After 12 hours of standing almost non-stop, her legs often ached and her eyes burned from lack of sleep. But whenever she saw a patient recover after a successful emergency treatment, Chloe always felt that every bit of effort was worth it. However, when she talked about her work with her family, she rarely received much interest. Her parents saw nursing as a stable but fairly ordinary job. They usually asked a few simple questions about whether her shift had been tiring, then quickly moved on to talk about Ryan's latest successes in his business career. In their eyes, Ryan was building an impressive career with many opportunities ahead of him. Chloe's job, on the other hand, was simply a way for her to earn a steady income. They never truly understood the pressure and responsibility she faced every night in the emergency room. Even so, Chloe didn't complain. She knew her work had real value. And it was during those long nights in the emergency department that she began to notice problems others didn't see, problems that would eventually lead her to an idea that would completely change her life. After several months working in the emergency room, Chloe began to realize something she had never considered before. Not every difficulty in the hospital came from a shortage of doctors or equipment. Many of the real problems actually came from how information was shared between different departments. On the busiest nights, sometimes 10 or even 15 patients arrived at the same time. Each one had a different condition. Someone needed an urgent CT scan, someone had to be rushed to the operating room, another needed a cardiologist immediately. But the information about these needs was communicated in many different ways: written notes, phone calls, or internal messages. As a result, things sometimes became chaotic. One time, Chloe saw a patient forced to wait nearly 15 minutes simply because two departments didn't know who was responsible for handling the case. 15 minutes in the emergency room can be a very long time. It can determine whether a person lives or dies. Situations like that happened far more often than she had expected. During the rare breaks between her shifts, Chloe began writing down the problems she saw every day. She realized that if there were a system that could track patients in real time, automatically update their conditions, and allocate staff more efficiently, many mistakes could be prevented. But Chloe wasn't a programmer. She was simply a nurse who understood the hospital environment. So she reached out to Maya, an old friend from college. Maya worked in software development and had always been drawn to projects that solved real-world problems. When Chloe explained her idea, Maya immediately recognized its potential. The two of them began working together at night. Even after finishing her exhausting 12-hour shifts, Chloe would sit down with Maya to sketch out how the system might work. They named the project Pulse Link, a platform designed to connect the entire emergency department through one unified information network. Their goal was simple: to help doctors, nurses, and different departments know exactly what was happening with every patient at any given second. At that time, Chloe wasn't thinking about building a company or selling a product worth millions of dollars. For her, PulseLink was simply a way to make night shifts in the emergency room run more smoothly. But sometimes, the ideas that change a person's life begin with the smallest problems that others have simply grown used to ignoring. Once the idea for PulseLink took shape, Chloe's life entered a completely new phase. During the day, she and Maya sat in front of their computers, revising lines of code, testing features, and figuring out how to turn the original concept into a system that could truly work. At night, Chloe still returned to the hospital to continue her 12-hour shifts in the emergency room. Her schedule left almost no room for rest. There were days when Chloe slept only 3 or 4 hours before getting back to work again. She carried her laptop everywhere, to cafes, libraries, even the hospital break room, using every spare moment to keep improving the product. Maya often joked that Chloe was surviving on nothing but coffee and sheer determination. But Chloe didn't see it as a burden. Every time they completed a new feature, she felt the project moving one step closer to its original goal, helping the emergency room operate more efficiently. During all that time, Chloe's family knew almost nothing about the project she was working on. When she visited home on the rare weekends she had free, the conversations at the dinner table still revolved around Ryan and his business. No one asked Chloe what she was doing outside of the hospital. One day, after months of saving and investing her own money into the project, Chloe realized she needed a small amount of additional funding to keep developing PulseLink. She decided to talk to her parents and ask if they would guarantee a small bank loan for her. Chloe explained everything in detail: the system, how it could help hospitals manage patients and staff more effectively, and why it mattered. She hoped that this time her parents would truly listen, but their reaction left her deeply disappointed. Her father simply shook his head and said that phone apps were often just unrealistic ideas. He believed Chloe should focus on her stable nursing job instead of taking risks on uncertain projects. Her mother agreed. She said that starting a business was something for people with business experience, not for a night shift nurse. Chloe didn't argue. She simply nodded and thanked them for listening. But deep down, she had already made a decision. If no one else believed in the project, she would be the first to believe in it. And she would keep building PulseLink, even if she had to do it completely on her own. After nearly 2 years of almost non-stop work, PulseLink finally reached a stage where Chloe and Maya could test it in a real environment. It was a moment filled with both excitement and anxiety. Their idea sounded logical on paper, but whether it would actually work in the high-pressure reality of an emergency room was still a big question. Through a doctor she knew at the hospital, Chloe was given the chance to present the PulseLink system to a medical management board. She spent weeks preparing her presentation, refining every small detail to clearly explain how the system could track patients in real time, allocate staff efficiently, and help different hospital departments coordinate more quickly. On the day of the presentation, Chloe didn't speak like a business person. She spoke like someone who had spent hundreds of hours in the emergency room and truly understood the problems doctors and nurses faced every day. That authenticity caught the board's attention. After many questions and discussions, a large hospital agreed to test PulseLink in their emergency department. It was the first real opportunity for the system to prove its value. The results exceeded everyone's expectations. Within just a few months, patient processing times dropped significantly. Coordination between departments became much clearer, and medical staff felt their work was far less chaotic than before. News about the system soon began spreading throughout the medical community. Not long after that, a large medical software company in San Francisco contacted Chloe. They had heard about PulseLink and wanted to explore the possibility of partnering with her or even acquiring the entire company. At first, Chloe thought it was just an exploratory conversation. But after many meetings and lengthy negotiations, an official offer was finally made. The number left even Chloe silent for a few seconds. The company offered to buy PulseLink for $170 million. For Chloe, who once wrote the first ideas for the system during short breaks between exhausting night shifts, the figure felt almost unreal. But after thinking carefully and discussing it with Maya, she decided to sign the contract. In a single moment, the project many people had once dismissed as just a foolish app idea became a deal worth hundreds of millions of dollars. A few weeks after the deal was finalized, Christmas arrived. As they did every year, the Carter family gathered for a large dinner at her parents' house. The Christmas tree was decorated with lights and tinsel, and the dining table was carefully prepared with the familiar dishes the family always enjoyed during the holidays. This year, there was another reason to celebrate. Ryan had just been promoted at his company. According to Chloe's parents, it was a major step forward for the family's success. The moment Chloe walked into the house, she heard her father proudly telling a relative about Ryan's achievement. His voice was full of pride, just like every time before. Ryan sat in the middle of the living room, smiling as everyone congratulated him one after another. Chloe hung her coat on the rack and quietly walked into the dining room. No one asked how her work had been lately. No one asked what she had been doing outside the hospital. The only questions she received were the usual polite ones, like, "Are the night shifts still going okay?" Dinner began shortly after that. Everyone sat around the long table. Ryan was placed near their parents, right in the center. Chloe sat at the end of the table, between two relatives she only saw a few times a year. The conversation at the table quickly turned to Ryan. He talked about a new project at his company, the team of employees he was managing, and his plans for the future. Their parents listened with proud expressions on their faces. Every time Ryan finished speaking, someone raised a glass to congratulate him. Chloe sat quietly, offering a polite smile from time to time. The scene was nothing new to her. In fact, it was almost exactly the same as every family dinner she had experienced for years. No one knew that just a few weeks earlier, Chloe had signed a contract that would completely change her life. No one knew that the small project they had once dismissed as a foolish idea had now become a company worth hundreds of millions of dollars. But Chloe said nothing. She simply sat at the end of the table, listening as everyone continued to talk about Ryan's success, while the Christmas lights reflected softly off the wine glasses and laughter filled the room. And just like so many times before, Chloe let the evening pass in silence. Dinner continued with conversations revolving around Ryan. After a few glasses of wine, he became more relaxed and started talking more than usual. He spoke about his company's expansion plans, the investment deals he was considering, and how he believed he was entering the most important phase of his career. Everyone listened with their usual admiration. After a while, Ryan turned toward the end of the table, where Chloe was sitting. "So, what about you?" he asked with a half-teasing smile. "How's the nursing job going?" Chloe set her glass of water down and gave a small nod. "It's going well." Ryan chuckled lightly. "I still don't understand how you can work night shifts all the time. It sounds exhausting, and there's not much room for growth either." A few people at the table laughed along, as if it were just a harmless joke. Then Ryan seemed to remember something. "Oh, right," he said. "Didn't you mention you were working on some kind of app? That Pulse something?" Chloe looked at him. "PulseLink." Ryan shrugged. "Yeah, that one. How's that little app going? Or did you give up on it already? The atmosphere at the dinner table remained light. For Ryan, it was simply a teasing question. Chloe was silent for a few seconds. Then she spoke in a calm voice. I didn't give up. Ryan raised an eyebrow. Oh, really? Chloe nodded. I sold the company. That sentence made a few people at the table look up, but Ryan only smiled faintly. Sold it, he asked. To who? A medical software company in San Francisco. Ryan slowly swirled the wine in his glass. That doesn't sound bad, he said. So how much did they pay you for that app? Chloe glanced around the table once. The lights from the Christmas tree reflected softly on everyone's faces. Then she answered simply, $170 million. For a moment, the entire room fell silent. Forks and knives froze in midair. No one said a word. The whole table went still. For several seconds after Chloe said the number, no one spoke. Ryan was the first to break the silence. He laughed. You're joking, right? He said, shaking his head as if he had just heard something unbelievable. $170 million? For an app? A few relatives chuckled too, assuming it was just an exaggerated comment during dinner. But Chloe didn't laugh. She calmly took her phone out of her pocket. Without saying another word, she opened her banking app and placed the phone on the table, turning the screen toward everyone. Ryan leaned forward to look first. The smile slowly disappeared from his face. The number on the screen was not a joke. Even after taxes and other costs had been deducted, Chloe's account still showed an amount of money that most people in that room had never seen in their lives. Ryan looked up again, this time no longer smiling. Is this real? Chloe nodded quietly. The atmosphere in the room changed completely. Her father stared at the phone for a few seconds, as if trying to process what he had just seen. Her mother covered her mouth with her hand, clearly shocked. You really sold the company? She asked. Yes, Chloe answered briefly. For a moment, no one said anything else. The earlier stories about Ryan, the congratulations that had filled the room just minutes before, seemed to disappear completely. In her parents' minds, an uncomfortable question began to form. How had their daughter built such a successful company, without them even knowing? They began to remember the times Chloe had tried to talk about her project, the times she mentioned PulseLink, the times she had asked them to guarantee a small bank loan, and they also remembered clearly how they had reacted. In that moment, they realized a painful truth. For many years, they had never truly listened to their daughter. After the silence lingered for several minutes, the atmosphere in the room grew heavy. People kept glancing toward Chloe, but this time, the looks were no longer indifferent. They were filled with surprise, confusion, and a hint of awkwardness. Ryan was the first to speak. I didn't know you were doing something this big, he said slowly. Chloe looked at him but didn't answer right away. She stood up from her chair and picked up the coat hanging on the back of it. Her father stood up almost instinctively. Wait, he said. Where are you going? Chloe turned to look at the entire table. For the first time that evening, everyone was completely focused on her. I just want to say one thing before I leave, she said calmly. The room fell silent again. For years, everyone here has always compared me to Ryan, Chloe continued. Every success of his was celebrated, while the things I did were almost never noticed. No one argued. Even when I tried to talk about PulseLink, people said it was just a foolish idea. Her parents lowered their eyes to the table. Chloe took a slow breath before continuing. I'm not saying this to embarrass anyone, Chloe continued. But if this family wants to remain part of my life, a few things need to change. All eyes were fixed on her. First, Chloe said, I will no longer accept being compared to Ryan. We've chosen different paths. Second, I don't want to hear that my success was just luck. She paused for a moment. And finally, I think I deserve an apology for the years I was overlooked. No one said anything right away. Chloe put on her coat and picked up her car keys. Before stepping out the door, she turned back and looked at her family one last time. I don't need you to be proud of me, she said gently. But I do need to be respected. Then she opened the door and walked out, leaving behind a room still wrapped in silence.